In 2004, Warner Brothers released a movie called Torque. When production began, they expected it to be The Fast and the Furious with motorcycles instead of cars. But the film's director went a completely different direction by turning it into an over-the-top action film with subtle comedic elements that also acted as a send-up or light parody of The Fast and the Furious. In today's episode, we're talking everything Torque, from its troubled production that led to a messy release to its status as a modern-day cult classic. Let's get into it.
Heard you was up in Indochina eating sushi and shit.
I thought sushi came from Japan.
Know where sushi come from, nigga?
In the early 2000s, movies like The Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, and Gone in 60 Seconds made a shitload of money at the box office. So of course, Warner Brothers wanted a piece of the action. But instead of producing another street racing movie with cars, Warner Brothers instead purchased a script from first-time screenwriter Matt Johnson for a movie called Torque. The film revolved around a biker named Carrie Ford, who returns home after spending 2 years in Thailand while on the run from a biker gang called the Hellions. The leader of that gang, Henry James, was played by the same actor who appeared as Vince in the Fast and the Furious franchise. Henry demands that Ford return some stolen bikes to him that also contain illegal drugs. But the plot thickens when Ford is framed for the murder of a character named Junior, whose older brother leads a gang called the Reapers. With those gangs and the FBI in full pursuit, Ford attempts to clear his name and settle things once and for all. Shortly after Warner Brothers purchased that script, additional writers were hired to rewrite portions of it, and Neil Moritz, who has produced every Fast and the Furious movie to date, was brought in to produce the film. But of course, without a director, you don't have a movie, and this is where Joseph Kahn comes in. When pre-production for Torque was happening, Joseph was just 30 years old, but had already directed some of the most iconic music videos of that time. As of the making of this video, he has over 150 credits on his IMDb page, which doesn't even include the massive amount of commercials this guy has worked on.
Unbox the icons and turn up every moment with Frito-Lay Variety Packs.
But production on Torque began in mid-July of 2002. I'm not going to bore you by going over the cast list for this movie, but Torque was definitely an ensemble film. This movie was stacked with a good mixture of both established and up-and-coming stars.
Let's go!
You have to pay for the gas.
Oh, right.
Right from the jump, it was clear that Warner Brothers didn't trust Joseph as a director. This was his first time at the helm of a big-budget movie, so the studio decided that they wanted to take a hands-on approach when it came to Torque. And I would understand that approach if Joseph were inexperienced with a small resume, but we're talking about a guy who, by that point, had been directing music videos for over a decade. And I know what you're thinking. Music videos are usually just a few minutes long. How difficult could they be to direct, right? Just because music videos tend to be short in length doesn't mean that they are that much easier to direct. Not to mention, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of music videos had huge productions behind them and cost millions of dollars to make. And by the time Torque was in production, there were already several examples of highly successful music video directors who transitioned to feature-length movies. Aside from the distrust between the director and production studio, Warner Brothers was upset that Torque wasn't shaping up to be The Fast and the Furious, but with motorcycles instead of cars. Joseph instead wanted to make a highly stylized action movie that was basically, as he put it, a reaction to The Fast and the Furious. In the opening scene of the film, some tuner drivers racing in the desert are interrupted by Carrie Ford on his bike. At the start of the race, a tortoise is shown to basically insinuate that cars are slow. When Ford zooms past those drivers on his bike, a street sign spins and reveals the wording "Cars Suck." That opening scene lets you know that Torque is completely self-aware and taking more of a tongue-in-cheek approach to things. Other examples include the scene where Ice Cube pulls out a map and reads it at the expense of an oncoming driver. The part where Ford and Shane are racing, and he defies the laws of nature by somehow having enough time to dismount from his bike and lean on it in a cool-looking way. And of course, the over-the-top motorcycle duel that was subtly sponsored by Pepsi and Mountain Dew.
Going somewhere? You want some of this, bitch? Oh, I thought you never asked.
Another product placement gag happens when Val somehow manages to steal Dalton's bag of Doritos between bites. Torque sort of winks at the audience, whereas a movie like Superfast didn't pull any punches. That film acted as a straight-up parody of The Fast and the Furious in the same way that Scary Movie did with Scream. Although there is one particular moment in Torque that made no attempt at hiding the movie's intentions.
I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
There's also a scene at the beginning of the movie that pokes fun at that one shot in The Fast and the Furious, where the camera is flying through an engine, But Joseph actually implemented that same shot into a Janet Jackson music video over 1 year before The Fast and the Furious even came out. The problem was, higher-ups at Warner Brothers didn't want Torque to be a send-up of the Fast and the Furious franchise. Joseph alleged that the studio would fax him rewritten script pages almost every morning while production was going on. Key figures at Warner Brothers didn't like how the movie was progressing and thought that the combination of action and comedy would never work. Nonetheless, production continued, and by all accounts, it was hot as balls on the set of Torque. We're talking about Southern California in the middle of July. Temperatures averaged at about 89 degrees Fahrenheit, with triple-digit temperatures up to 107 degrees on certain days of the shoot. And if you know anything about these motorcycle leathers, to say that they are unforgiving in warm weather would be an understatement. Apparently, the costume department rigged up some of the actors' tracksuits with a system of tubes that siphoned cold water underneath their leathers while shooting outdoor scenes. Faizon Love, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. He played a character named Sonny who spends like 90% of the movie in a black truck under the blazing desert sun, and apparently the air conditioning was too loud to run while filming, so he kept being told to cut the engine off. He got so hot, sweaty, and angry that he basically cussed everyone out and got fired from the movie. But he was almost immediately rehired because so many scenes had been shot with him already that instead of doing reshoots or editing him out of the movie, it made more financial sense to just bring him back and film the rest of his scenes.
Faizon.
I'm hot.
I like this line.
The AC was on this day, so everything was cool.
Despite studio interference, scorching hot temperatures, and a little bit of on-set drama, production was eventually completed. But if you've ever seen Torque, you know that this movie was actually very much a visual effects showcase for its time. The movie definitely had its fair share of grounded stunt work, but Joseph Kahn had a lot of ideas that just weren't possible through real-life stunts. The Torque DVD includes some mock-ups of computer-generated stunts that eventually became fully realized. And it's really crazy to see one of the coolest scenes in the movie go from what looks like a Sega Saturn game to the finished product that you're looking at right now. The studio was given a rough cut of Torque before post-production began. Unsurprisingly, they were not happy with that early cut, so a few cast members were forced to come back for reshoots about 6 months after production wrapped. As far as I can tell, the scenes from those reshoots are the fight scene between Carrie Ford and the tuner drivers at the beginning, the superbike chase towards the end of the movie, and the final conversation between Ford and Shane before the credits roll. But if you know anything about the theatrical release of Torque, you know that those reshoots weren't enough to save this movie. I purposely haven't mentioned Biker BOYZ up to this point because on top of the fact that they both revolved around motorcycle racing, Torque and Biker BOYZ had a lot in common. Like I said, production for Torque began in mid-July of 2002, and filming took place in various parts of Southern California, whereas Biker BOYZ began filming in late July of 2002, in, you guessed it, various parts of Southern California. Faizon Love revealed that there was a day where both movies were even shooting in the same location. Not to mention, both films have a scene that was shot on the 6th Street Bridge in downtown Los Angeles. Even though Biker BOYZ started shooting shortly after Torque, filming and post-production was a lot quicker on that movie, and Biker BOYZ ended up releasing in January of 2003. Warner Brothers originally scheduled Torque for release in March of 2003, but to avoid saturating the market, they decided to hold off on releasing it until January 16, 2004. Here in the United States, January is often referred to as dump month, because after the holidays hit, people are usually pretty strapped for cash and therefore less likely to spend money on movie tickets. Because of those factors, Torque, which was made on a budget of $40 million, only took in $21 million in the United States, with a worldwide total of $46 million. Simply put, Torque was a box office bomb. I've already hammered it into your head that Torque was meant to be a tongue-in-cheek parody of the street racing subgenre. But in a 2018 interview with Vanity Fair, Joseph Kahn himself described the film as a funny bike movie starring Ice Cube that's also inspired by Akira and other anime. As appealing as that might sound, Warner Brothers frankly had no fucking clue what they were doing when they marketed this thing. I dug up a bunch of different trailers and TV commercials for Torque, and none of them reflect the film in a good way. I honestly don't blame people for skipping out on the movie when it was in theaters, because the marketing made it look like a terrible Fast and the Furious ripoff with motorcycles that just takes itself way too seriously. Moviegoing audiences saw those trailers and expected something much different than what they received. Film critics also had a lot of problems with Torque. Out of the 116 reviews on the movie's Rotten Tomatoes page, 90 of them are negative and only 26 of them are positive. Pretty much every positive review mentioned the self-aware nature of Torque and praised it as a send-up of other street racing movies. But Joseph Kahn later admitted that the studio's instincts were correct, stating, "Torque was just a bad match of material and director. The studio wanted a serious movie, and I wanted a comedy." As time goes by, more and more people have discovered Torque and go into the film with a better understanding of what it was trying to achieve. I purposely didn't spoil a lot of the movie in this video because I implore anyone who hasn't seen Torque to check it out. I only just watched it for the first time a few years back, which is a testament to how bad the marketing was for this film. I was 12 years old when Torque hit theaters. I was part of the target audience and should have been aware of its existence. I would have absolutely loved this movie when I was that age.
Fast bike, huh?
Yeah, sometimes.
But even now, I appreciate that Joseph Kahn basically took the game Road Rash and turned it into a movie, specifically the 1996 version that came out on PC. That game even had the band Monster Magnet on its soundtrack, and they make an appearance in Torque during the biker bar scene. Ironically, Torque did sort of receive a video game adaptation. Warner Brothers released a promotional tie-in game in late 2003 called Maximum Torque. This was a free low-budget game, so it was unsurprisingly really bad. I also wanted to mention that there's a really cool nod to the movie Duel in the first act of the movie. The red Plymouth Valiant and the Peterbilt tanker truck make a quick appearance during a chase scene. If you hate this movie, I'm fine with that, but I personally think that Torque was way ahead of its time. You need to remember that when this movie hit theaters, there were only 2 Fast and Furious films in existence. What I'm getting at is Fast and Furious fatigue hadn't really set in yet. I have nothing against anyone who enjoys the Fast franchise. More power to you. But even though these movies make a shitload of money, a lot of people have grown tired of them. I think that if Torque had been made just a few years later, the studio had enough confidence in the film's director to just let him have creative control, and the marketing leaned into the humorous parody aspects of the film, it would have received a much better reception. Especially if it had come out around the same time as Scott Pilgrim, which I'm only bringing up because Torque sort of weirdly reminded me of that movie at times, especially with its visual style. But the movie also has Ice Cube right before he started doing family-friendly comedies. Adam Scott plays an FBI agent years before Step Brothers rocketed him into another level of success. Jamie Presley and Eddie Steeples, who played Crabman and Joy in My Name is Earl, appear in this movie a few years before that show even came out. And you get to see Dane Cook get punched in the face by a biker. If you go into Torque with a good mindset, you'll be rewarded with one of the most entertaining action movies of the mid-2000s. Trust me. And I'm not just saying this to fuel the algorithm, but comment down below if you're a fan of Torque, especially if you saw the movie in theaters. Let me know what you thought of it at the time of its release. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.